$80,000 of taxes. But by doing a 1031 exchange, I got to pull this money out. I could have put it in a deal that I was already going to buy, and I would have avoided $80,000 of taxes. So that's the power of the 1031 exchange, the like-kind exchange. It is the ability to take money from a sale of one property, move it into the other without paying taxes. That is why it's so powerful. What's going on, guys? My name's Hayden Crabtree. Today, we're here to explain to you what a 1031 exchange is, how you can use it, the pros, the cons, all the rules, as well as the pitfalls. And I'm gonna throw in 2 examples to show you real world applications of how this can work wonders, and also how this, if not used correctly, can get you in a lot of trouble. All right, so I've got this list here. We're gonna talk about what is it. I'm gonna give you an example. We're gonna talk about the rules of the 1031 exchange, and then we're gonna talk about the pitfalls. So before we kick off, pro tip, it's not actually called a 1031 exchange. It's the IRS section 1031, which explains what the like-kind exchange is. So it's actually called the like-kind exchange, okay? And I've chicken scratched for handwriting, but bear along with me. Like kind, what does that mean? It means we're trading something that we have for something like it. It is a like kind exchange, not a 1031. It is IRS section 1031, which goes on to explain this. So simply put, what is it? Well, it's a tax benefit that real estate investors can use to go from one property to another property without having to pay taxes if done correctly. So let me give you an example. Okay, I had a rental house. It's actually a property that had a couple of different units. I bought this property for $170,000 5 years ago. I've done one refinance on this property. My current debt is at $150,000. Okay, so I've almost pulled all my money out. That doesn't really matter. I had an offer to sell this property for $400,000. Okay, so if I owed the bank $150,000, $400,000, and that would have netted me on a sale $400,000 minus $150,000. There was no realtors, there's nothing else like that. So $400,000 minus $150,000 is $250,000. $250,000 is what I would have netted on this deal. Now, I'm trying to get out of single-family houses, and I buy, if you don't know me, I buy storage units. Okay, so I had this storage facility under contract, and I was going to buy this property for, it was $2.25 million. I was getting an SBA loan on it, and I was taking on a partner. I needed $300,000 to make this make sense. My down payment was going to be $300,000 for my portion, okay? Now, if I could have sold this property and I could have done a 1031 into this, which means I never actually get the money. It goes to what we call is a qualified intermediary, which is a QI, and is the person that middlemans it. Big rule here, if you want to 1031, you cannot touch the money. It has to sit in an account with somebody called a qualified intermediary. There are attorneys who are qualified intermediaries. They have to get some sort of certification in order to do it, but you cannot touch the money. You can't accept the money and just tell the government, hey, I'm 1031 it. No, you were never allowed to touch the money in between here and here. So again, I was gonna sell some rental houses that was on one property, one transaction, and buy a self-storage facility. Now, I could have moved this money. I would have had to have brought $50,000 more to get to $300,000. But what this would have allowed me to do, guys, is let's think about this for a second. This property that I was gonna sell for $400,000, I've depreciated all of it. I've owned it, there's no basis on it. So I would have paid capital gains tax on the sales price of $400,000 minus my basis was $0. So I would have paid tax at $400,000 on taxes. Now, at a 20% capital gain rate, that comes out to what? That comes out to $80,000 of taxes. But by doing a 1031 exchange, I got to pull this money out. I could have put it in a deal that I was already going to buy, and I would have avoided $80,000 of taxes. So that's the power of the 1031 exchange, the like-kind exchange, is avoiding these taxes and moving up. That is a real-world example. So That is, what is it? It is the ability to take money from a sale of one property, move it into the other without paying taxes. That is why it's so powerful. The cool thing is there are no exemptions. There are no size caps. If you bought a property for $1 million and you're selling it for $10 million, guess what? That $9 million gain, all of it can be moved tax-free. Now, what's the really cool part about this, guys, is let's say I move that money, again, $250,000, and let's say I move that money over, and let's say I move that money into these storage units, okay? And let's say I bought these storage units for, again, 2.25. Well, let's say they appraised 1 year after I bought them for $3 million, okay? I can go and I can refinance out, let's call it, let's just say I refinance out what I have into it, 2.25 million. Well, guess what? That means all the money, the equity, the $300,000 that I got out comes back. This is my wallet. It can come back into my wallet. And now I don't have to pay taxes on that. So it can allow you to get into a property and you don't immediately get to put the money in your pocket tax-free, but you can go do a refinance, which refinances, by the way, are probably the third best tax loophole in all of real estate investing. The number one tax loophole, by the way, if you don't know what it is, it's called a cost segregation study. I just interviewed my accountant who does these. If you want to watch that video, it's here on my YouTube channel. I'll link it in the description. I'll also put it up in the top right corner right now, okay? But I could put that money back in my wallet, again, tax-free, which is how I access this money. I access this money tax-free by buying another property, avoiding the taxes, and then refinancing out to get my money, or I don't refinance. I just leave my money in there and I use it to grow and snowball and compound my portfolio. Okay, so there is ways to get access to that cash if you want it, okay? So that's what it is, and that's an example. Now, let's talk about the rules. The first rule is called let's write out the rules. The first rule is called the step up. 1 second, my phone. All right, we're all good. All right, the first rule is called the step up. Now, what does that mean? That means if I were to sell those rental houses for $400,000, that means I have to buy what I buy. I know I was telling you I was going to buy a $2.25 million storage facility, but I have to buy at least $401,000 of real estate. I cannot go into a $300,000 property. Okay, this is not allowed. This is illegal. If you do this, you're paying your taxes, which, hey, maybe that makes sense for you if you're getting such a good deal on the property, but this will not count. It will not qualify. That's what the step up in basis is all about. That's rule number one. Now, what you can do, by the way, and this is rule number two, is called ID3. Okay, what you can do with this $400,000 is you can go and you could buy one for $300,000, and you could buy another for, it can be as low as $100,000 and one. But the total of these has to equal at least $400,001. You could buy another one too. You could buy another one in here for $200,000. Okay, and then you'd be buying $601,000, right? So there's a couple of different limitations that you have to abide by, but overall it's really flexible. So what does the ID3 mean? Well, you have to tell either your accountant, your qualified intermediary, I think maybe you can tell your attorney, but you have to identify a property within, and these two kind of go together, the 45, that's bad, the 45, 180. So identify three. What does that mean? You have to tell your qualified intermediary, which if you guys need a qualified intermediary, comment below. I'll help you find one. If you need a qualified intermediary, your CPA or your attorney, I think 3 properties, which means you have 45 days. Let's say that I sell this property and the day that I close selling my property is January 1st. So January 1st plus 45 days, I'm really bad with calendars. So let's say that's probably February 14th. So by February 14th, I could do it before, but I cannot do it after. I have to write a letter out or an email. It's better if it's on letterhead, and you send it an email by this day to one of those 3 people and say, this serves, it doesn't have to be super fancy, but it says, this serves as my identification for Section 1031 exchange that I am looking at buying A, B, or C properties. And you just say the address or you say the parcel number. So you have to identify. That is called identifying properties. I am identifying I may buy this property, or this property. Now, you can identify more, but if you identify more than 3, so if you identify 4 properties, 5 properties, 6 properties, guess what? You have to buy them all, or you failed your 1031 exchange. So if you're like, oh, I've got a lot of different options, narrow it down to your top 3 and be sure you're gonna buy one of those 3, because if you identify 4, you have to buy all 4 properties. So it's a weird rule, but the identify 3 is your second rule, and the 45-180. Again, you have to identify by February 14th, but within 180 days, so again, let's say I sell on January 1st plus 180 days, I think that comes out to, we'll just say July 1st. By July 1st, you have to actually buy the properties, okay? You can't wait more than 180 days, 6 months to actually buy these properties. If you wait more than that, your 1031 is invalid. You have failed, you're paying your taxes. So the rules here are the step up in basis, the identify 3, and to identify 3 within 45, and to actually buy them, or one of them, if you only identify 3, within the 180-day period. Those are the main rules. You have to know about a 1031 exchange. I'll throw in a bonus one here for you guys, is the 366. 366. What is that? Well, that's 1 day more than a year. That means if I buy a property, let's say I buy a property on those rental houses I've been talking about, let's say I buy it on April 1st, 2022, that means plus 366 days is April 2nd, 2023. This, if I sell this property before holding it and owning it for 366 days, then I cannot do a 1031. And the downside is it's taxed when I sell it at short-term capital gains, AKA ordinary income, not long-term capital gains rates. So if you're buying a property, you always want to hold it for at least a year and a day to open those options up to yourself. Now, I've heard some debates. I've heard that it's all about your intent. Did you intend to buy this property and hold this property long-term? But I've also heard holding it for at least 366 days is the way to go and the way to be safe. So those are the 4 main rules that I abide by when I'm doing a 1031 exchange. And I know you're telling yourself, man, this like kind of seems like there's a lot of rules. Well, here's how I look at a 1031 exchange. I look at a 1031 exchange like I'm playing a hand of poker. If you've ever played a hand of poker, what do? You all sit down and you say ante up, right? Ante up means you're putting in some money before you even get dealt the cards. And if you get bad cards, really bad cards, what do? You fold. And so whenever I look at doing a 1031, I 1031 every property I sell, because if I want to ante up, again, a qualified intermediary, sorry, I don't have it on the board, but a qualified intermediary is going to cost you anywhere from $500 to $1,000. And that's what they're going to charge you whether you buy a property or not. Okay, that's what they're going to charge you whether you buy a property or you don't buy a property. So why not pay the $500 to $1,000 and open these options up to yourself? And if you can work a deal, then great. But what we're going to talk about now is the pitfalls and the example of why it's not a good idea to bank on a 1031, okay? Why it's not a good idea to bank on a 1031. So we just knocked out the rules. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments. Happy to help out. But pitfalls, okay? Here are the pitfalls. And I got these written down. If you fail to identify, AKA break the rules, then you pay your taxes, okay? That's pretty basic, right? If you break the rules, you're paying your taxes. Number 2, if you identify but don't buy, then guess what? You pay your taxes, okay? Pretty simple. Here's the other one. If you identify, right? If you identify and you go to buy, but let's say the property you identified has environmental issues and you didn't know that because you identified the property, you didn't have it under contract yet, then guess what? You didn't have your due diligence time to know if it had environmental issues. You didn't do your due diligence time to get a property inspection on it. So if one of the properties you identify is knocked out because of things you found in due diligence, they don't care. They don't say, oh, well, okay, we'll give you another 45 days to identify or anything like that. The rules are what the rules are. You have 45 days no matter what. So if you identify and you go to buy, but there's something wrong with the property you're gonna buy, guess what? You pay your taxes. Okay, now all this seems pretty basic, but it leads back to one universal rule of the 1031. Don't sell a property just a 1031. You have to sell a property. If you're going to sell a property, you have to be okay with paying the taxes that come from that sale. You should not bank on a 1031 happening. Let me give you an example, okay? So I run a coaching program where I help people who want to put their money to work in real estate, commercial real estate. And I've got a student right now, as of time of shooting this video, and he had a property, let's see here. He has a rental house, okay, and he's doing Airbnb, okay? The Airbnb market has shifted. He went from, in 21, he made like 90K. In 22, he made 50K. This is in cash flow. And then in 23, he's breaking even. He's not making any money. He says, I don't like the trend of this. I want to get out of the Airbnb market. The cool news is that I bought this property for $220,000. My light went off. We're gonna do the rest of this in the dark. I bought this property for $220,000. The market went up, okay? The market went up, so then it appraised for, I think it was $400,000. And he went in and he did, because there's a spread here, he did a refinance and he pulled out $100,000. So now his new debt on this property was, I think it was at $320,000 was the debt. Well, he went to go sell it. He got a contract on this for $420,000. So he was gonna sell it for $420,000, okay? But again, his proceeds here, 420 minus 320, he's gonna walk away with $100,000 of sales proceeds, okay? And he also got to refinance $100,000. So sounds like a good deal overall. But guess what? Whenever this happens here, again, this property, if he's like, I'm gonna sell it and I'm gonna 1031 it. He already put it under contract, everything, got in my coaching program, started talking about this. And I said, well, here's the problem, Scott, is if you don't sell, here's your tax situation. This property, you've already depreciated the basis down to pretty much zero. You're selling it for $420,000, okay? That means you're gonna be taxed on $420,000. Now, what is long-term capital gains on $420,000? I think it's taxes is going to equal $84,000 when his proceeds are only gonna be $100,000. So if he fails on his 1031, out of this sale, he's only going to get $16,000. Now he's still gonna make a little money. That's better than losing money. There is a scenario in which his taxes here, like imagine if he was selling this instead of $420, imagine he was selling it for $350. Okay, if he was selling it for $350, he would literally have to pay to get rid of this property. So that's one of the huge pitfalls of 1031. If you just depreciated the property, refinance the property, then you can literally, if you're thinking of 1031 and that's your strategy, and you fail your 1031, you literally have to pay money to sell your property because the government doesn't care about how much in debt you have. They don't care. That's a double-edged sword about pulling money out. In a refinance is if you sell the property and you've refinanced, you've already captured all your profits, okay? And if you've depreciated it and you've taken tax advantage that way, you're going to have to make up for that. So that is all my lessons on 1031. If you guys have any questions, drop a comment below. I'm happy to help you out. If you want my book, you can get it absolutely free, audiobook, PDF, link in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, subscribe to the channel. We're putting videos just like this out every single week. Be great.